It is a small plastic pig, or a tin box with a slot in the top. When you were a child, someone gave you one. A parent, a teacher, a grandparent who meant well. And they told you something that sounded like plain common sense. That putting a coin inside and not taking it out made you good, responsible, disciplined, a grown-up in training. You believed them, because why wouldn't you? But you never asked the one question that mattered. Who taught them to teach you that? Because the idea that saving money is a virtue did not fall from the sky. It did not come from nature or arithmetic or common sense. It was manufactured, built deliberately over more than a century by people who profited every time you saved. And they were never hiding. You were just never taught to look. Start with the words already in your head. A penny saved is a penny earned. Benjamin Franklin never wrote that. What he actually printed in 1737 was colder and stranger. A penny saved is 2 pence clear. It was a line about dodging tax and avoiding cost, not a warm moral lesson. Over 200 years, it got sanded down, softened into a proverb gentle enough to hang on a classroom wall. The man who turned thrift into a worldwide religion came later. His name was Samuel Smiles. In 1859, he wrote a book called Self-Help. Its central claim was simple and very convenient, that poverty was not caused by low wages or broken systems. It was caused by bad habits, drinking, idleness, and above all, a failure to save. Fix the habits, he said, and you fix the poverty. It was a comforting idea, if you happened to already be comfortable, because it meant the poor had earned their poverty. There was just one problem. In Smiles's own time, ordinary banks would barely bother with the few coins a working family could spare. The poor were told to save by a system that gave them nowhere to save. The virtue was preached for decades before the means to practice it even existed. That gap is the whole story. Now, meet the man who industrialized it in America. In 1914, a financier named Simon Strauss founded the American Society for Thrift. He spent the rest of his life as the country's loudest preacher of saving. Lectures, pamphlets, a national movement, all telling ordinary people to guard their pennies. But Simon Strauss did not make his money saving pennies. He made it selling bonds. His firm pioneered the real estate mortgage bond. He sold more than $1 billion of them and helped build skyscrapers with the proceeds. And he marketed them, naturally, to small savers, the careful, disciplined people who had been listening to men exactly like him. Then the Depression came, and those bonds collapsed. By the mid-1930s, more than 80% of that era's real estate bonds had defaulted. The savings of the prudent? Gone. The apostle of thrift had made his fortune selling the opposite of thrift. But this was never about one man. It was a machine, and it was organized. They built a holiday for it. Thrift Week, launched in 1916, timed to Benjamin Franklin's birthday. Backed by banks, schools, and the YMCA, it ran for decades. And they went after children directly. They put working savings banks inside elementary schools. By the late 1920s, 1 in 6 American schoolchildren had an account opened at their desk. The group that ran much of this stated its goal plainly: to reduce, in its own words, pauperism, intemperance, and crime. And, as historians describe it, to Americanize the children of immigrants. Teaching a child to save was never only about the child. It was about producing a certain kind of citizen and a certain kind of customer. The banks did not outsource the message. In 1920, the American Bankers Association formed a committee to put its lessons into public schools. They wrote talks for bankers to deliver to children in person. And if you assume that ended a century ago, it did not. The same association still runs a program that has sent roughly 150,000 bankers into classrooms, reaching more than 6 million students. The institution that profits from your deposit still teaches your kids that making it is a virtue. Then something far bigger noticed: the government. During the World Wars, your savings stopped being personal. It became a weapon. The banks had wanted your deposits. Now the government wanted your loyalty. Both had learned the same trick. Ask for the money by calling it a virtue. Liberty bonds raised about 2/3 of the cost of the First World War. Not by force, but by reframing thrift as patriotism. Movie stars toured the country to sell them. Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, drawing crowds of thousands. Children bought war savings stamps for 25 cents. Boy Scouts marched under a single slogan: every scout to save a soldier. In the Second World War, 85 million Americans, more than half the country, bought bonds. Saving was no longer prudence, it was duty. And duty is much harder to question than advice. But forget the history for a moment. Look at what happens right now, the instant you save. You walk into a bank or you open an app and you hand over your money. You believe you are storing it somewhere safe. You are not. You are lending it to the bank at close to 0%. The bank then lends that very same money back out as a mortgage, a car loan, a credit card balance, at many times the rate it pays you. The gap between the two is its profit. They call it the net interest margin. And it does not stop there. Your deposit, once lent out, gets redeposited somewhere else and lent again. Each deposit funds new loans, again and again, rippling outward through the system. There is no longer even a law requiring the bank to hold any of it back. The reserve requirement in the United States was set to 0 in 2020. Your savings are the cheapest raw material in the entire economy. And you hand them over for almost nothing. That almost nothing has a price. By one estimate, American households have lost around $160 billion a year in interest since 2008, quietly transferred to the people on the other side of the trade, to large borrowers, to corporations, and to the government. You followed the rule, you were disciplined, and you were charged for the privilege. Here is the part that should bother you most. Economists have understood for nearly a century that saving has a dark side. If everyone saves at the same time, the economy starves, because your spending is somebody else's income. Stop spending, and their income vanishes, and soon enough, so does yours. They call it the paradox of thrift, which means the system, as a whole, needs most people to keep spending. The economy needs spenders, but you, personally, are told to save. Both of those things are true at the same time, which means somebody has to be the one who funds everyone else, who supplies the cheap money and absorbs the lost interest. And a long time ago, very quietly, it was decided that the somebody would be you. And this is where the lie becomes truly clever. Because in the last 40 years, the cost of an ordinary life exploded. College tuition rose by more than 250%. Housing and healthcare followed it upward. Worker productivity grew by nearly 90%, while the typical paycheck grew about 13%. Economists argue about the exact figures, but not about the direction. At the same time, companies quietly stopped carrying your risk. The pension, which once promised a fixed retirement, was replaced by the 401k, which promises nothing. The risk did not disappear. It was moved onto you. And right at that moment, as the math of a normal life stopped working, the old message grew louder. Skip the coffee. Make your lunch at home. Track every single dollar. Save. The most famous version, the latte factor, claimed that small daily treats were the reason you weren't rich. It was checked. The math did not hold. It quietly assumed returns that almost no one ever earns. But it did its real job anyway. Because if your problem is a $4 latte, then your problem is not their wages. Frugality was rebranded as a personal virtue at the precise moment it became a structural impossibility. A lecture about spending is so much cheaper than a raise. Now, stay with me here, because the opposite lie is just as dangerous. Saving is not worthless. Far from it. A small cushion of cash is the single most protective thing a person without much money can own. It is what stands between a flat tire and a payday loan. Between one bad month and a debt that follows you for years. And the advice to just invest it all instead is its own quiet trap.
The people with no cushion are exactly the ones who will be forced to sell at the worst possible moment. So this is not a video telling you to stop saving. Behavior matters. It only moves you around inside the range. And the range itself was set by someone else, long before you showed up. So keep your emergency fund, keep the habit, but put down the guilt you were handed along with that piggy bank.
You were never failing a test of character. You were playing a small role in someone else's accounting. The lesson was never really about virtue. It was about whose virtue and who quietly collected on it. So the next time someone tells you that saving money makes you a good person, just smile and ask the only question this channel ever asks. Good for whom?